Henry never expected the betrayal to be so public. The chandelier light gleamed off champagne glasses, laughter rose and fell in the background, and Henry stood frozen in the center of it all, watching him, Liam Carter, slip an arm around Spencer Grant's waist. The announcement came casually, like it wasn't the most insulting thing Henry had ever heard in his life. Liam was engaged, to Spencer. Henry's fingers tightened around the stem of his glass. 5 years. That was how long Henry had been with Liam. 5 years of late-night conversations, whispered promises, arguments that always ended with Liam pulling him close and telling him, "It's you. It's always you." 5 years of Henry believing, knowing, that no matter what, they would find a way to make it work. And Spencer, the golden boy, the perfect son, the family friend who had always been effortlessly charming, effortlessly better. Spencer had always been around, hadn't he? Smiling that easy smile, winning over parents and professors, excelling at everything Henry had to fight twice as hard for. Spencer was the kind of person Henry's family had wished he would be, poised, responsible, never reckless, never messy. And now, he was engaged to Liam. Henry should have seen it coming. Should have known that Liam's whispered, guilty excuses, the "my dad hates you," the "it's just too complicated," had never been about Alex Carter at all. Alex Carter, Liam's father, the man Henry had always known disapproved of him. A man who never had to say it outright, because his silence spoke volumes. But maybe Alex hadn't been the problem. Maybe Liam had never been forced to break up with Henry. Maybe he had just been waiting for something better. And Spencer had been right there, all along. A fresh wave of laughter rippled through the party. Henry felt Liam's gaze sweep over him, cautious, unreadable. Spencer, standing beside him, smiled easily, oblivious, or worse, not oblivious at all. Henry downed his drink and left. The spiral that followed was not his proudest moment. Drinks blurred into more drinks. The club was suffocating, bodies pressing close, and Henry chased numbness like it was something he could catch if he ran fast enough. But no matter how much he drank, how many lips brushed against his, how many times he pretended none of it mattered, the thought looped, over and over. Liam is engaged. After 5 years, he replaced me like I was nothing. Another round, another shot, another stranger's hands on his body. At some point, he found himself in the passenger seat of a car that wasn't his. A soft laughing voice beside him, warm and suggestive, but Henry wasn't listening. His mind was back at the party, staring at Spencer's ring. The fallout. He woke up to sunlight stabbing through unfamiliar curtains. The stranger from last night, mouth dry, the stranger from last night, was still asleep beside him. Henry groaned, dragging himself upright. His stomach twisted, not from nausea, but from the cold, suffocating realization of where the spiral was leading. His phone was vibrating on the nightstand. 30 missed calls, several messages from his father. An hour ago, "Henry, call me now." 5 minutes ago, "If you don't get your act together, we're done." Henry scoffed, but it wasn't as satisfying as it should have been. His father wasn't bluffing. Not this time. He leaned back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, letting it sink in. He wasn't just losing Liam. He was losing everything. And Henry Vanderbilt was not the kind of person who lost, so maybe it was time to stop grieving. Maybe it was time to win. Henry spent the entire drive home in silence, sunglasses shielding his bloodshot eyes. His father's words still burned in his phone screen, but he refused to read them again. "If you don't get your act together, we're done." He had heard that threat before. This time, though, he could feel the weight behind it. His parents were exhausted with him. No more excuses, no more "my son is just figuring things out." They were ready to cut him loose. Henry wasn't sure what stung more, the fact that his own parents had one foot out the door, or the fact that Spencer had defeated him again. Liam's rejection wasn't about Alex at all. It was never about Alex. Liam had never been forced to leave Henry. He had wanted to, and Henry had been too blind, too arrogant, to see it. Henry clenched his jaw and turned his phone over in his hand. He was done drowning himself in liquor and self-pity. He had spent a lifetime pretending not to care, but deep down, he did. He cared that Liam had tossed him aside like he was disposable. He cared that Spencer got to play the perfect fiancé, that everyone in their social circle would say, "Spencer and Liam always made more sense." But Henry wasn't going to let that be the story. If Liam had shattered him using Alex's disapproval as an excuse, then Henry would burn that excuse to the ground. He smirked to himself. Why settle for ruining the son when you can ruin the father? By the time he was home, Henry had already started plotting. Step 1. Learn everything about Alex Carter. Not the broad strokes, successful businessman, uptight, judgmental as hell. He already knew all that. He needed weaknesses, cracks in the armor, and, fortunately, he remembered one. 6 years ago, when Henry had been barely 21 and already too good at charming the right people, he had met Alex at a fundraiser. Alex had been freshly divorced, exhausted, standing at the bar with a glass of whiskey. Henry had sidled up next to him, making a joke about how miserable he looked. And for a moment, just a flicker, Alex had looked at him with something almost like interest. Then he had snapped his walls back up and shut Henry down so fast it had almost been funny. But Henry had seen it, felt it. Now, with fresh eyes, he saw the opportunity he had missed before. Because Alex wasn't just judgmental. He was bitter. He pulled up the list of upcoming social events, skimming for one where he knew Alex would be. Time to find out how much self-control you really have, old man. Henry arrived at the event fashionably late, because of course he did. The venue was all polished glass and overpriced decor, filled with people who knew each other through business deals and inherited wealth. Henry barely spared them a glance. His focus was already locked on the man standing near the bar. Alex Carter. Sharp suit. Perfect posture. That same ever-serious expression, like he was too dignified to enjoy himself. Henry smirked. God, you make this too easy. He made his approach slow, deliberate, grabbed a drink on the way, took a sip, and then slid up beside Alex at the bar like it was the most natural thing in the world. You know, you could at least pretend to have fun, Henry murmured, tilting his head. People might start to think you actually like being here. Alex didn't even glance at him. And people might start to think you have better things to do. Henry grinned, predictable, cold, dismissive. Exactly the reaction he wanted. But I don't, Henry said lightly. He leaned against the bar, watching the way Alex's grip on his glass tightened, just slightly. And I happen to enjoy these little parties. The company is always so interesting. He let his gaze flick over Alex. Slow. Appreciative. That earned him a glance. Sharp. Wary. You're wasting your time, Alex said flatly. Henry just smiled. I don't believe in wasted time. Alex exhaled, his patience already thinning. He turned, fixing Henry with that cold, assessing look. What do you want? Henry let the question hang between them for a second. Then, with a slow, deliberate smirk, he said, Now, that's the fun part, isn't it? Alex's jaw tightened. Find someone else to play your games with. Oh, come on, Henry drawled, letting his voice dip into something almost teasing. It's just a little conversation. Alex wasn't amused. I'm not interested. Liar. Henry could see it in the way Alex wouldn't quite look at him. In the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't unaffected. He just didn't want to be affected. That was fine. Henry had plenty of time to push. He leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice. That's not how your ex used to look at you? The reaction was instant. Alex's expression turned cold. His grip on his glass tightened, and for a split second, Henry swore he saw something like anger flicker in his eyes. Oh, that hit a nerve. Satisfied, Henry straightened, taking a sip of his drink like nothing had happened. Alex set his glass down a little too carefully. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Jaw tight. Henry watched him go, feeling something sharp and thrilled twist in his chest. You're not untouchable after all. The game had officially begun. As planned, Henry had done his research. Small, exclusive. The kind of place where people pretended to appreciate art while discussing business deals over expensive wine. Exactly the type of scene Alex Carter couldn't avoid. And therefore, Henry wasn't surprised to see Alex at the gallery event. Henry adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, smirking to himself. Perfect. He took his time weaving through the crowd, pretending to examine the paintings when, really, his focus was on the man standing near the far wall, drink in hand, gaze impassive, as he listened to some art patron drone on. Alex looked as sharp as ever, suit crisp, posture stiff. He looked bored. Henry decided to fix that. He approached smoothly, plucking a glass of wine from a passing tray, and slid in beside Alex with an easy, knowing smirk. "I hope you're not pretending to care about this conversation." Alex exhaled through his nose, slow and measured. His tone was flat. Unimpressed, but Henry caught the tiny flicker of recognition in his eyes. He had noticed him. "Good. I'm flattered you remember me." Henry sipped his wine, tilting his head. "I thought you might have blocked me out entirely." "I tried," Alex muttered before turning back to his conversation. Henry smiled, unbothered. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping just for Alex to hear. "Shame. I've been thinking about you." Alex's jaw tightened. "If you're here to amuse yourself at my expense, don't bother." "Oh, but it's so easy," Henry said, grinning. "And I do love a challenge." Alex finally turned to face him fully, eyes sharp, scanning Henry like he was something to be dealt with. "You think this is a game?" Henry's smile didn't waver. "A little." Alex huffed a humorless laugh, shaking his head. "You're transparent." Henry raised a brow. "Am I? Then tell me. What do I want?" Alex's gaze darkened. "Attention." His voice was low, edged with something almost cutting. "Because you can't stand being irrelevant. Because you've lost control of everything else in your life, and now you're here, chasing a reaction out of me." Henry felt his smirk flicker, just slightly. It was annoying how quickly Alex cut through the act. How easily he turned the game back on him. But Henry wasn't about to lose his footing. He tilted his head, letting his eyes drag over Alex's form, slow and deliberate. Henry's voice dipped, teasing, suggestive. "Maybe I just like getting under your skin." Alex's fingers tightened around his glass. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, Henry thought he saw something in Alex's expression. Something restrained, something barely held back. But then Alex exhaled sharply, setting his drink down. "Grow up, Henry." And with that, he turned, walking away without looking back. Henry watched him go, a slow smirk curling at his lips. Alex could act as cold and controlled as he wanted. Henry had felt it. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot. Despite his confidence, Henry hadn't expected to find himself alone with Alex tonight. He also hadn't expected Alex to be the one looking for him. The charity gala was dull, as expected. Another gathering of the wealthy and self-important, all pretending to care about something other than their own tax write-offs. Henry had been nursing a drink by the terrace doors, considering slipping out early when a familiar voice cut through the noise. "You enjoy wasting my time, don't you?" Henry turned, already grinning before he saw Alex standing there, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Well," Henry mused, sipping his drink, "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." Alex didn't take the bait. "I don't have the luxury of playing games like you do." Henry hummed, tilting his head. "And yet, here you are, seeking me out." Alex exhaled sharply, clearly irritated. "I don't appreciate being used as a distraction for whatever crisis you're running from." Henry's smirk froze for half a second before he masked it with a laugh. "Crisis? That's dramatic." Alex's gaze was unrelenting. "Is it? You lost everything, your relationship, your family's patience, whatever future they had mapped out for you. Now you're here, running your mouth, stirring up trouble, because it's the only thing you have left." A slow burn of something curled in Henry's chest. Anger? No, not quite. "I think you're projecting," Henry murmured, stepping closer. "After all, you're the one chasing ghosts. Still bitter your ex traded you in for someone newer? Someone richer? Someone like me?" He took another step forward, crowding into Alex's space, just enough to make it impossible to ignore him. "Tell me," Henry continued, voice low, deliberate. "What is it about me that bothers you so much?" His fingers barely grazed the lapel of Alex's suit, teasing, testing. "Is it that I remind you of him?" Alex didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't push him away. For a long moment, all Henry could hear was the faint sound of music from inside, the distant chatter of guests. Alex's breath was slow, controlled, but his eyes, they burned. Then before Henry could say anything else, Alex grabbed him. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't slow, it was rough, impulsive, a hand fisting into Henry's jacket, pulling him in. Their mouths collided. The kiss all frustration and sharp edges, too fast, too much, too real. Henry's back hit the wall before he even processed what was happening. Alex's grip was firm, his body warm against his, the air between them charged with something dangerous. Henry barely had time to smirk before Alex abruptly pulled away, his breathing uneven, his expression unreadable. This, Alex exhaled sharply. This was a mistake. Henry, still pressed against the wall, ran his tongue over his lower lip, tasting the remnants of the kiss. He looked up at Alex, feeling breathless and thrilled. "Then why did you do it?" he murmured. Alex didn't answer. He just turned on his heel and walked away. Henry stayed where he was, heartbeat hammering, a slow, wicked grin curling at his lips. He had won. Of course, Henry had always been good at getting what he wanted, and right now, he wanted Alex Carter to break. The kiss had been unexpected, but Henry wasn't about to let it be a one-time thing. Alex was already unraveling. He just didn't know it yet. All Henry had to do was give him the right push. So when he found out Alex would be at an upscale lounge for a business gathering, Henry made sure to be there too. Not by accident. Alex noticed him immediately. Even from across the dimly lit space, Henry caught the way Alex's shoulders tensed, the flicker of recognition in his eyes. But Alex didn't acknowledge him, which meant Henry had to make himself inignorable. He let Alex stew for a while, keeping his distance, pretending to be engrossed in his own conversation. But eventually, after a couple of drinks and just the right amount of liquid courage, Henry made his move. He found Alex near the bar, nursing a whiskey, watching him like he knew what Henry was about to do. Henry slid in beside him, resting an elbow on the counter. "You've been staring." Alex didn't react. "You've been making it easy." Henry smirked. "You kissed me." Alex took a slow sip of his drink. "I regret it." Henry let out a soft laugh. "Sure you do." Alex's fingers tightened around his glass, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he sighed, tilting his head toward Henry, voice quieter now. "What do you want from me?" Henry leaned in, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of whiskey and expensive cologne. "I want you to admit you liked it." Alex exhaled sharply. "You're exhausting." And yet, Henry let his fingers brush against Alex's wrist, deliberate, lingering. "You can't seem to stay away." Alex didn't pull away. Not immediately. For a second, the air between them was thick, with something heavy. In a sudden movement, Alex grabbed Henry's wrist, his grip firm, his gaze burning. "Don't know what you're playing with." Henry's pulse jumped, but he didn't let it show. He just smiled, slow and knowing. "Then why don't you teach me?" Alex inhaled sharply, and then he snapped. The next thing Henry knew, he was being pulled down a dark hallway, past the lounge private booths, into a quiet, secluded corner. And then, Alex's mouth was on his. It wasn't like before. It wasn't just anger. It was need, raw and desperate. As Alex pushed him up against the wall, hands gripping his waist like he was trying to stop himself and failing miserably, Henry gasped against his lips, half laughing, half breathless. So much for regret. Alex's answer was to kiss him harder. Henry let himself melt into it, into the heat, into the sheer satisfaction of winning. After a night of passion, Henry woke up alone. The bed beside him was empty, untouched, like Alex had never even considered staying. His shirt lay on the floor, his jacket draped over a chair. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the morning light. He should have felt victorious. He won. He got Alex to break, to want him to give in. So why did it feel like losing? His phone buzzed. For a split second he hoped it was Alex. It wasn't. Instead, the screen flashed with a message. "Liam and Spencer's engagement party, tomorrow. Big event. Your family will be there. You coming?" Henry let the words sink in. He could ignore it. He should ignore it. But the thought of Liam and Spencer, all happy and perfect while he was what? The bitter ex? The joke? No. If they wanted a show, he'd give them one. And this time he wasn't coming alone. Alex was already regretting everything when Henry found him. It was late, and Alex had just come home from work, expecting silence, anything but Henry standing outside his door, looking like he belonged there. "I knew you'd come back," Henry said, leaning against the railing. "You don't seem like the type to avoid unfinished business." Alex inhaled sharply. "Whatever this is, it ends now." With a tilt of his head. "Well, not only that." Alex crossed his arms. "Then what do you want?" Henry's smirk widened. "An invitation." Alex frowned. "To the engagement party." Alex let out a humorless laugh. "You're out of your mind." Henry just smiled. "I never joke about revenge." Alex stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, his expression darkened. "I'm not playing whatever game this is," Henry hummed, pacing slightly. "You could say no. I am saying no." Henry turned back to him, gaze shrewd. "But that would mean agreeing with Liam, wouldn't it?" He took a step forward, voice smooth, knowing exactly where to press. Letting him have his perfect little narrative. "You disapproved of me." He listened. "He gets his happily ever after with someone acceptable." Alex's jaw tightened. Henry leaned in, voice dropping lower. "Unless, of course, you don't want him to be right." Silence. A flicker of something unreadable passed over Alex's face. Not anger, not irritation, something sharper. Henry pressed. "This isn't just about me, is it?" Alex's glare snapped back to him. "Don't push it." "Oh, I am pushing it," Henry murmured, watching him closely. "Because that wasn't just about me. That was about Spencer." Alex's silence was telling. Henry's grin widened. "God. You don't like him either, do you?" He laughed, delighted. "And here I thought I was the disgraceful one." Alex muttered something under his breath. Henry stepped in, tilting his head. "Sorry, I didn't catch that. Too busy basking in the fact that I'm not actually the worst option." Alex's scowl deepened. "You're still a mistake, but not the biggest one. Spencer is safer. He plays the long game." Henry raised an eyebrow. "And that bothers you, why exactly?" Alex didn't answer. Henry let the silence stretch, then hummed, amused. "Oh. You think he's worse than me." Alex didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. Henry pressed a hand to his chest, mock affronted. "And here I thought I was your least favorite person." "You are. And yet." Henry stepped even closer, voice smug. "You're considering giving me that invitation. Just to see Spencer fall on his face." Alex's expression was carved from stone, but Henry could feel the hesitation, and that was all he needed. Henry made sure to arrive fashionably late. The engagement party was exactly as extravagant as he expected. Glittering chandeliers, a string quartet playing something pretentious, champagne glasses, clinking over carefully rehearsed laughter. The kind of event where everything looked perfect, but everyone was waiting for the first sign of scandal. And tonight, Henry was the scandal. He stepped inside, exuding confidence, dressed in a sleek black suit that hugged him in all the right places. But the real triumph? The man walking beside him, Alex Carter. Conversations faltered. Eyes turned. Whispers rippled like a shockwave. Henry could practically feel the scandal weaving itself into the air. Perfect. Beside him, Alex was rigid, his posture screaming, "I regret this already." Henry barely held back a smirk. Liam noticed them almost immediately. His easy smile shattered. His fingers tightened around his champagne glass, his entire body going stiff. Spencer, ever composed, recovered first. He stepped forward with polite surprise, like he hadn't stolen everything from Henry. "What a surprise," Spencer greeted smoothly. Henry tilted his head. "Is it? I thought we were all family here." Liam exhaled sharply. Spencer barely hesitated before turning his charm onto Alex. "Mr. Carter, lovely to see you. Though I must admit, I didn't expect you to entertain Henry's theatrics." Henry flicked his gaze to Alex, waiting. Alex didn't agree, didn't disagree. He just looked at Spencer, long and considering. Liam noticed. His confidence wavered for the first time. Henry smiled. "Alex and I had an interesting conversation the other day." "About you and Spencer?" Liam tensed. "What the hell are you talking about, Henry?" Alex warned, voice steady. Henry ignored him. "Tell me, Alex, what do you think of Spencer?" Liam squared his shoulders, glaring at Henry. "I don't care what bullshit you think you're pulling, but dragging my father into this, seriously? Watch your tone." Alex finally spoke. Liam turned on him. "Oh, now you have a problem? Not when you let my ex climb all over you." His voice dropped, bitter. "Or are you just trying to piss Mom off?" Alex exhaled through his nose. "This isn't the time." Henry turned to Liam, lowering his voice. "I should be thanking you. If you hadn't thrown me away, I never would have seen what was right in front of me." Liam inhaled sharply, fists curling. "Enough," Alex cut in. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded attention. And when Henry turned, he realized Alex wasn't just speaking to Liam. He was speaking to him. Henry tilted his head. Oh? Are we pretending you're above all this now? Alex's gaze was unreadable. I don't play these games, Liam scoffed. Maybe you don't. But he does. Something in Henry's chest tightened. Alex exhaled slowly, glancing at the frozen party around them. Then, quietly, he turned to Henry. Is this what you wanted? To prove you can ruin things? Alex's voice was steady, but something tired lurked beneath it. Just like you ruined yourself? That infuriating question had sent Henry into hiding for 3 days. No texts, no calls, no dramatic social media posts. Just silence. For someone who had spent his whole life making noise, it felt foreign. But for once, he wasn't sure what to say. Because Alex's words still rang in his ears. Is this what you wanted? Just like you ruined yourself? Henry didn't even know the answer. So he did what he always did. Found a bar, drank too much, let himself slip into something mindless and fleeting. But even the distractions weren't working. Not this time. Because when the hangover settled, when the adrenaline burned out, he felt empty. And Henry was never supposed to feel empty. So when Alex showed up at his door, it was almost a relief. Almost. You're not answering your phone, Alex said, standing in the hallway like he regretted being there already. Henry smirked, leaning against the doorframe, deliberately casual. Didn't realize you cared. Alex exhaled sharply. I don't. A lie. A pretty one, but a lie all the same. I thought you didn't play games. Alex's expression darkened. I don't. But you do. And I'm done letting you drag me into them. Something sharp twisted in Henry's chest. He forced out a laugh. But it didn't sound right. Oh please. You weren't exactly resisting. Alex stepped closer. Not in anger, not in warning, just closer. And suddenly, Henry was very aware of the space between them, or lack of it. You want to hurt Liam, Alex said quietly. I get it, he hurt you first. Henry's jaw tightened. But what happens when the revenge stops feeling good? Alex continued. What happens when you realize it never did? Henry swallowed. I never needed it to feel good. Alex just looked at him then. And whatever he saw made his expression soften in a way that Henry wasn't prepared for. I should hate you, Alex murmured. Henry exhaled sharply. Well, get in line. Alex ignored that. I wanted to hate you. Something in Henry's throat tightened. Alex shook his head, almost like he was frustrated with himself. But I don't. And just like that, Henry felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. Because this was not how the game was supposed to end. It had been months since the engagement party, since everything imploded, and yet, somehow, they were here. Across the table, Alex watched him carefully, like he was still waiting for Henry to bolt. It was true that Henry had always loved dramatic endings. The kind that left a mess behind. Scattered pieces, burned bridges, a lingering taste of something bittersweet. That was how he had expected this story to go. But standing here now, in a quiet cafe with his fingers wrapped around a coffee cup that wasn't even his, Henry realized. Maybe some endings weren't about destruction. Maybe some were about rebuilding. Not enemies. Not exactly lovers. Something in between. Henry sipped his coffee, letting the warmth settle in his chest before glancing up with a smirk. You're staring, Alex huffed. You're dramatic. Henry laughed, a true laugh. Flatter me more, lover. Alex sighed, shaking his head, but there was something almost fond in the way he looked at Henry now. Something that made Henry's pulse stutter. Because this wasn't part of the plan. The plan had been revenge. Chaos. A game with no winners. And yet here he was, sitting across from the man who was supposed to hate him. You still don't regret it, do you? Alex asked, voice softer than Henry expected. Henry tilted his head. What? Seducing you? He grinned. Not even a little. Alex gave him a look but couldn't hide his smile. That's not what I meant. And Henry knew that. Knew exactly what Alex was asking. Did he regret the revenge? The mess? The years of bitterness that led him here? Henry tapped his fingers against his cup, considering. The answer should have been obvious, but as he met Alex's steady gaze, something in his chest twisted, something he wasn't ready to name. Finally, he exhaled, slow and measured. No, he said, but I do regret not seeing you sooner. Alex didn't react right away. He only blinked, expression unreadable. As if weighing Henry's words, but he didn't look away, didn't leave. The cafe thinned out as the afternoon stretched on, conversations dwindling into background noise. At some point, Henry's coffee had gone cold, but he still held the cup between his hands, staring out the window. His reflection gazed back at him, faint in the glass, caught between the fading daylight and the warm glow inside. He had spent years chasing satisfaction in all the wrong places. But now, he wasn't thinking about the past. He was thinking about what came next. Liam would find out about them soon, if he hadn't already. The thought of Liam's expression alone was enough to make Henry smirk. It would be chaos. Henry's own family would have a fit. Not that they hadn't already washed their hands of him, but this would be the final nail in the coffin. Dating a man 15 years older than him. A man who had never approved of him. A man who should have been his worst mistake. And yet, Henry couldn't bring himself to care. Not when Alex was still sitting across from him, looking at him like maybe Henry was something more than a disaster waiting to happen. Maybe he was something worth staying for. Henry exhaled, slow and deep, before turning back to Alex with a grin. "Well," he said, "should we start taking bets on who loses their mind first?" Alex scoffed and just shook his head. "You really are impossible." Henry's grin widened. "And yet," Alex sighed. But his lips twitched, and Henry thought, maybe endings weren't so bad. Not when they led to something like this.